Summations have come to an end in the Harvey Weinstein case. We have our very own Jesse Weber outside of 100 Center Street to give us a recap as to today's testimony. Jesse, how you doing?
Hey, Brian, doing good over here. We just saw the conclusion of the arguments in the Harvey Weinstein trial. Jonah Luzzi delivered the closing argument for the state, not as long as defense attorney Donna Rotuno. She finished up right before the lunch break, and it was a fiery closing argument where she labeled Harvey Weinstein a violent rapist who kept using tricks and surprises to capture his victims. That if you use tricks and surprises, that can never be consent. And as far as why these women came forward, a big topic that came yesterday is these women might have a financial incentive. Maybe that's going to better their careers. Maybe they want to be part of a movement. And no, Prosecutor Luzzi said this was not fun for them. This was not easy for them. They were compelled by their own morality to come forward. They have absolutely nothing to gain by testifying. A big pattern that she wanted to say is that, sex crimes are different than any other kind of crimes. This is the only type of crime where we put the victim under the spotlight and that we start to blame them. Well, for example, should they have gone to that apartment? Should they have kept in contact with them? Should they have put themselves in those situations? That is not something fair that we should do. She went into, it was first started with Annabella Shora and said that she actually filled in a lot of those gaps. Remember, we're talking about something from 27 years ago. And a lot of what Prosecutor Luzzi did was kind of assumptions, and I submit to you, jury, that this is what may have happened in terms of how Harvey Weinstein got up to her apartment, that perhaps he felt that she was drugged the night he raped her. So a lot of these filling in the gaps. I'm not sure how the jury felt about that. She even assumed that she called Harvey Weinstein Richie Rich, and assuming that he had a phone that would have a Rolodex for Annabella Shore's personal information. That's, again, how he might have known what apartment she was in. And the main real factor there was that she tried to paint out the image of how Annabella Shore was ultimately raped, and that this wasn't a career booster for her to come forward, that this was really horrific details. And a big theme for Prosecutor Luzzi throughout the explaining about Annabella Shore as well as the other witnesses is that they had opportunities to embellish. Brian, we talked about this, that these witnesses had opportunities to embellish and make the stories worse for Harvey Weinstein, yet they did not. And I thought that was a really strong moment, but I think for Annabella Shore, the strongest moment that Prosecutor Luzzi made was that she introduced evidence or reintroduced evidence for the jury that Harvey Weinstein was worried about Annabella Shore, put her on this red flag list to investigate even before she came forward with her allegations. So it makes you think, what was he ultimately concerned about? She then moved on to Miriam Haley and said this was a vulnerable woman that he took advantage of, and that just because she went over to his apartment, his Soho apartment in 2006, that doesn't automatically mean that someone is looking for sex or thinks sex is going to happen or even think that they're going to be sexually assaulted. She moved on to Jessica Mann and said this, too, was a woman who Harvey Weinstein manipulated, took advantage of, that she was in dire straits with the situation that she was in, and throughout their whole relationship, I'm using air quotes here, don't have the ability to do that she never had a consensual relationship with him, that she was always pressured and she never would have wanted this. And again, with the 3 Molyneux witnesses, Prosecutor Luzzi suggested that every time that the defense attorneys tried to bring in witnesses that would hurt their case, she flipped the script and said they actually supported their case. And any inconsistencies in what one person said and the accuser said, that just shows how the truth really does come out, because they're going to have inconsistencies. If they were biased or trying to go against Harvey Weinstein, they would have matched their stories up point for point, but they didn't. So that is just a quick summation of the prosecution's summation that we saw today.
Now, Jesse, many of us were thinking that this would be a huge disadvantage for the defense to go first, the prosecution to have an entire night to review the defense's closing arguments. Did you see anything from the prosecution summation that reflected that they were combating some of the statements that were made by the defense the day before?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was a big part of the prosecution. This was an advantage for them going second. They hit upon points that Donna Rotuno mentioned yesterday. Again, as I said, whether it was to suggest that these women have lawyers. Okay, so here's an interesting point. So Donna Rotuno says there's a big thing made yesterday from Donna Rotuno. Ms. Aluzzi said that Donna Rotuno made a big point yesterday about how these women have lawyers. If you were put in this situation, wouldn't you want to consult with somebody about what you're going to testify to? Harvey Weinstein has 5 attorneys at his table from different states. There was an objection put there by Damon Sharonis, and that's just gives you an example of what ultimately happened. One point. And throughout what we heard, there was a constant rebuttal to what we heard yesterday from Donna Rotuno.
Now, when I heard Donna Rotuno giving her closing arguments, there was no love lost between the two sides. Was that, I won't say animosity, but was that passion shared by the prosecution in depicting or talking about how Donna Rotuno was defending her client, Harvey Weinstein?
I'm sorry, Brian, can you repeat that again? I was pushed off to the side by one of the officers. He seems to be closing this up on me.
No worries. I was saying there was no love lost between Donna Rotuno in terms of her arguments and summation, how she would sometimes punch pretty hard at both the prosecution and Gloria Allred. Did the prosecution equally punch back at Donna Rotuno and how she was defending this case?
Oh, absolutely. And there was this no love lost about that and how she was combating the arguments put forward for Donna Rotuno and suggesting that these women, are out to gain something. Remember, Donna Rotuno painted these women as liars, people who are out to hurt Harvey Weinstein, that they're, taking advantage of the situation. And as the prosecution, she is justifying what these women are doing and is ultimately their savior. So you could see there was this kind of back and forth and a response to every one of the comments made by Donna Rotuno. In fact, one of the points, I don't know if you were there for it, Brian, yesterday, Donna Rotuno really hit on the fact that the prosecution didn't redirect Jessica Mann. And it was at that point today that Prosecutor Aluzzi said, I didn't redirect because let's look at the cross-examination from Donna Rotuno. I think it pretty much helps our case. Or, their witness that they called, whether it was Talita or whether it was Claudia Salinas, they actually help our case. So it was an interesting way to flip the script that happened numerous times during this closing.
Jesse, last question. Reactions from the jurors. I know as a defense attorney, I'm always looking for the involuntary head nod while they're hearing the summation. Did you see any of that during the prosecution's closing?
They appeared very attentive at times throughout the whole line of the closing argument. They did look into the gallery at certain points. They did look maybe tired at certain points, but they were, as from my opinion, as attentive as they were with the defense's closing argument and listening to every. And by the way, I should mention that unlike Donna Rotuno, Joan Aluzzi actually got closer to the jury. She was speaking even closer to them, speaking directly to them. So it would be hard for them not to pay attention or, fall asleep or anything like that. They appeared to look at every one of the slides that were shown. And this was a shorter closing. So you know that their attention spans maybe didn't wane if they did yesterday with the 4-hour closing from the defense.
Jesse Weber, thank you very much for your hard work. I know it's almost 32 degrees out there. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Tuesday when jury deliberation begins.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Have a good one. Now, Ann Bremner, we're hearing all of this, the prosecution's closing arguments. It sounds like this was a brawl between defense and prosecution. From what we've heard so far, how do you think that closing argument by the prosecution might have went?
Well, they had a real advantage, Brian, to be able to basically, for once, come back and rebut what the defense says. It's usually a flip script, like Jesse said. So, and I think I don't like it when lawyers get down in the down in the trenches and fight. But it doesn't sound like it was really that ugly. It was basically just saying, trials are organized combat. We all know that. And the question is, how professional can you be in engaging in that kind of combat? And it sounds like they were very professional and very persuasive.
Now, one thing that I thought was peculiar, and I definitely want your opinion on this. During the defense, they anticipated that the prosecution would say, as they did in their opening statement, and I'm looking for my notes here, that Harvey Weinstein used tricks and surprises, that he was testing these women, that he reached out. But the defense argued that there were emails where the women would reach out to him. So how could he be testing and surprising them and using tricks? But it seemed, for me at least, reading from Jesse's notes and also from I'm hearing from what he's saying, it seems like the prosecution really just kept going with their theme rather than answering that very strong question. How do you think that might have worked out?
I think that they just need to stay on the straight and narrow and stay with their theme. I mean, don't buy into the defense, and they've got a strong case. The problem with the one alleged victim, with all of the emails and contact after the fact and everything else, it's like that saying, the more you explain it, the less I understand it. And so I think they have to be wary of something like that. Jurors just saying, enough already. I mean, we can't make heads nor tails of this. And we think there's evidence of consent, not just in what happened, but in what was said in emails and in conduct after the fact.
Now, and I'm sure you know this, as we all defense attorneys know this, sex cases are hard to prosecute for the prosecution. It is I won't say it's very easy for the defense, but it is a much harder case than a murder case, than a gun possession case, than other types of cases we might typically see. Then you add in these emails. Is it that this case is just so hard based on its nature and the evidence for the prosecution that they might get a mixed bag of results or might even get an acquittal? Or do you think that just the fact that there are so many women making these outcries and so many facts that are similar that, you know what, Harvey Weinstein's kind of dead on arrival, or guilty on arrival, sorry.
He was convicted in the press for sure before the trial. That's what I think, with 100 women. But now you've got a pretty finite handful of women in this case with pattern evidence. And then, of course, the complaining victims, alleged victims. So I really think that there were so many doubts as to the one that it could result in maybe a hung jury on that count or an acquittal, mixed verdicts, and then maybe conviction on the other. And I don't know why. I don't know everything about all of the pattern evidence in this case. But if part of that pattern is something really weak, it can be carried by the pattern. That's why we know we have pattern evidence. So there's a possibility that can sustain a guilty verdict, even though one of the alleged victims, I think, there's a lot of ammunition against her, and it was viable information for cross-examination.
And I want to leave our viewers with this before we go to a break. It's what the jurors are going to hear before they start to deliberate. And we all hear from New York as defense attorneys that a reasonable doubt is an honest doubt of a defendant's guilt for which a reason exists based on the nature and quality of the evidence. It's an actual doubt, not an imaginary doubt, and it is a doubt that a reasonable person acting in a manner of importance would likely entertain because of the evidence presented or because of the lack of evidence. That paragraph is huge in every criminal case. And I think everything you've said, Anne, fits into that as to what is a doubt and how is it to be applied here. We'll see what they do come Tuesday, and we'll be back after this break.